All right, let's get something straight, sweetheart. I've been around long enough to know when someone's bluffing and when someone's standing on something real. You can roll your eyes, you can scroll your feed, you can pretend the world hasn't lost its mind, but deep down you know it has. Chaos everywhere, people chasing trends like headless chickens, claiming enlightenment while drowning in confusion. And right in the middle of all that noise, someone like Bernie Sanders steps up and says something that sounds almost too bold for politics: Islam has a future. Now, whether he realized it or not, that statement was less of a prediction and more of a confession, because you can't look at history, logic, and the state of this broken circus we call civilization without noticing that Islam isn't fading, it's rising.
You think that's an accident? Please. Let's lay down the evidence like a courtroom file. Empires have come and gone. Rome, Britain, the Soviet Union, all of them strutted around like they'd last forever. Guess what? They're museum exhibits now. But Islam, still here, still growing. Not by force, not by propaganda, but by persistence. That's not luck. That's longevity backed by truth. The Quran said it ages ago. It is He who sent His messenger with guidance and the religion of truth to make it prevail over all religion. And listen carefully, because this isn't about marketing. It's about momentum. Truth doesn't retire. Truth doesn't need a rebrand.
Truth doesn't fade when it's out of style. You can silence a person, but you can't silence reality. And Islam is that reality that keeps showing up no matter who tries to bury it.
Wars, colonization, smear campaigns, history threw everything at Muslims and still couldn't break them. It's almost poetic, really. The same hands that tried to destroy Islam ended up shaking in surrender when they saw its resilience. The Mongols tried to crush it. They ended up joining it. Western powers tried to erase it. It resurfaced stronger than ever. And now in 2025, when the so-called modern world is too busy selling lies dressed as freedom, Islam stands like the last honest witness in the courtroom of history.
The fastest growing religion on the planet, and not because it's trending, but because people are finally realizing truth doesn't come with filters or sponsorship deals. Let's be honest, you can cancel a celebrity, but you can't cancel what's real. And Islam, it's as real as it gets. Every attempt to weaken it has only revealed its strength. Every era that mocked it ended up proving its necessity. You can't out-argue something built on divine truth. You can only delay your own awakening to it. So when Bernie said Islam has a future, he was just saying what history already proved. This isn't a phase, it's the pattern. Truth doesn't lose, it outlasts.
You can call that divine design or cosmic justice. Either way, it's happening. And here's my verdict. The world may play judge, jury, and executioner, but Islam always walks out of the courtroom unscathed. That's not a coincidence, darling. That's evidence. The kind of evidence that doesn't just demand respect, it commands it. Now sit tight, because this was only point one. The next case we're examining, the world's emptiness and how Islam fills it like nothing else can. Now let's move to the next case, and honey, this one's about emptiness, the kind that money, fame, or fancy filters can't fix. You look around today and everyone's pretending they've got it all together, smiling for selfies while dying inside.
It's a parade of broken people hiding behind perfect lighting.
They scroll through endless feeds, chase meaningless goals, and then wonder why they feel hollow at the end of the day. And here's the verdict. It's because the world is stuffing its soul with junk food, emotional fast food, quick pleasures that leave you even hungrier than before. And Bernie Sanders, of all people, pointed out the obvious without even realizing it. People are starving for something real, something that lasts longer than a dopamine hit. And Islam, well, Islam doesn't hand you a slogan, it hands you a system, a structure, a cure. You see, Islam doesn't tell you do whatever makes you happy. No, it says, do what makes you whole. Big difference.
Happiness fades, wholeness stays. The Quran calls the shots clearly, verily, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest.
Not in likes, not in luxury cars, not in temporary highs in remembrance. Because rest isn't about shutting off your phone, it's about reconnecting your soul. People today are trying to fill spiritual holes with digital distractions. You can't fix loneliness with another subscription plan. You can't silence anxiety with another shopping spree. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said something that would make every self-help guru retire. The most beloved deeds to Allah are those done consistently, even if small. You hear that? Consistency, discipline. Islam isn't about hype, it's about habit. It teaches you how to show up every day, pray, breathe, think, and act with purpose. That's what modern people are missing. Purpose, not pleasure purpose. Because when life has no direction, every road looks tempting. That's why so many are lost. They've mistaken movement for progress. Islam clears that confusion. It gives you a compass when the world is spinning like a broken clock. Fasting, prayer, charity, family, it all builds a rhythm that aligns your body, mind, and soul. You don't chase trends, you build foundations, and that's what Bernie was talking about when he said people are searching for something deeper. They're tired of being sold fake empowerment by influencers who can't even control their own lives. Islam doesn't sell fantasies, it teaches reality. It doesn't say you're perfect as you are, it says you can be better than you are. It gives accountability where the world gives excuses. You want peace.
Earn it through discipline. You want happiness. Build it through gratitude. You want success. Anchor it in honesty.
And the funny thing, when people finally taste that structure, that balance, they feel peace for the first time. You see them on TikTok, on YouTube saying, I tried fasting for Ramadan just to see what it's like, and it changed me. Of course it did. You stopped feeding the body and started feeding the soul. The world's chaos quiets down the moment you give your heart what it's been starving for, truth. And here's the punchline. Islam doesn't need to convince anyone. It doesn't beg to be liked. It just stands there like the only adult in a room full of confused children saying, enough, sit down, let's fix this. That's why people are coming to it. Because when life's noise gets unbearable, silence starts sounding like salvation. And Islam is that silence, that balance, that truth that doesn't just calm the storm, it outlasts it. So here's my ruling on emptiness. It's self-inflicted. You fill yourself with illusions. You stay hollow. You fill yourself with remembrance of Allah. You finally rest. Case closed. Now let's move on to the next file, the biggest criminal in modern culture, the ego. Because if emptiness is the disease, ego is the poison keeping everyone sick. Now let's talk about the ego, the loudest, most arrogant, and most destructive voice in the modern courtroom of life. Everyone today thinks they're the main character in some grand movie, walking around like the world owes them applause. It's me, my goals, my brand, my hustle, my success. Like humility was deleted from the dictionary. You can't even scroll for 5 seconds without someone preaching self-love while drowning in narcissism. It's like society is on a full-time ego trip with no return ticket, but Islam looks that ego straight in the face and says, sit down, you're not the judge here. And let me tell you something, that's what humanity desperately needs right now, a system that actually checks the ego instead of worshiping it. Islam calls this community the Ummah, and honey, that word isn't just poetic fluff, it's revolutionary, it's the antidote to ego. Because when Muslims stand shoulder to shoulder in prayer, the billionaire next to the janitor, the scholar next to the taxi driver, it's not just symbolism, it's a statement.
A courtroom lineup that says, before Allah, no one's special. You leave your titles, your status, your fake pride at the door. When that forehead hits the ground in sujood, every layer of ego peels off. You're not CEO John or influencer Ahmed anymore. You're just a servant of the Almighty, equal to every other soul in that line. That's power, real power. The kind that humbles without humiliating. Because Islam doesn't destroy your confidence, it refines it. It teaches you to stand tall without stepping on anyone else.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. You want to talk about equality? That's equality before social media even existed. That's community without competition, unity without ego. And that's exactly what this broken, lonely world is craving but can't manufacture. Everyone's screaming, be yourself, but nobody's teaching how to lose yourself in something greater. Islam does. It tells you stop obsessing over your reflection and start reflecting on your purpose. Because when you make life all about you, you end up empty. But when you live for Allah, suddenly your life fills with meaning bigger than your own name. And don't get me wrong, ego isn't just a personal flaw, it's a social disease. It breaks families, destroys nations, kills compassion.
Look at the news. Wars fueled by greed, politics driven by pride, relationships collapsing because everyone wants to be right instead of being kind. That's ego running wild.
Islam slams the gavel down on that nonsense and says the best of you are those who are most humble. Think about that. In a world where arrogance is glamorized, Islam makes humility the badge of honor. And you see, that's what Bernie was indirectly pointing at. The future doesn't belong to inflated egos, it belongs to united hearts.
Because a world built on pride will always crumble, but a world built on humility will always rise. The concept of Ummah isn't some ancient dream, it's a blueprint for the future.
When Muslims truly live it, it's unstoppable. History proves it. The golden ages of science, art, and medicine in the Islamic world didn't happen because of one man's ego. They happened because of collective excellence. Everyone worked for something higher than themselves. That's what Islam teaches. You are part of something greater. And if that doesn't humble you, nothing will. So here's my ruling. Ego is guilty. Guilty of dividing humanity. Guilty of killing empathy. Guilty of making people believe they're gods when they can't even control tomorrow.
Islam's verdict?
Drop the ego, embrace the Ummah, and watch how the world starts healing. Because in the eyes of Allah, your worth isn't measured by your followers or your fame, it's measured by your faith. Case dismissed. Now let's move to the next file, a paradox that flips the whole concept of power on its head. Because the world says strength means dominance, but Islam says real strength comes from submission. Now let's crack open this next case, the case of strength. And believe me, this is where most people in this modern circus get it dead wrong. The world today parades muscles, money, and microphones as signs of power. Everyone's flexing physically, financially, emotionally, pretending to be unbreakable. But let me tell you something straight. Half of them would collapse the moment life hits them without warning, because real strength has nothing to do with how loud you roar. It's about how calm you stay when the storm rolls in. Islam doesn't teach you to dominate. It teaches you to discipline yourself. That's strength with substance. That's strength that lasts when everything else falls apart. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "The strong person is not the one who can overpower others, but the one who controls himself when angry." Now that's a definition the world forgot, because you can conquer cities, build empires, or shout the loudest in a debate. But if you can't conquer yourself, you're weak. Islam flips the script. It tells you that strength is in restraint, not reaction. You don't hit back just because you can. You hold back because you know when to. That's maturity, that's control, that's mastery. And it's not weakness, darling, it's wisdom. Islam doesn't glorify chaos, it glorifies composure. Look at how Muslims are commanded to fast during Ramadan. No food, no water, no temper. You think that's easy? Try it. Try staying patient when you're hungry, polite when you're tired, kind when you're tested. That's where true power hides, in self-control. And the beauty is, Islam trains that muscle every single day. 5 prayers a day, each one a reset button for your soul.
You pause, breathe, bow. Remember who's really in charge. You see, the West built a culture that glorifies rebellion. Follow your heart, break the rules, do what you want. But Islam says, follow the truth, respect the rules, do what's right. And that's not oppression, that's order. Because freedom without discipline is chaos wearing perfume. You think it smells good, but it'll choke you eventually. And that's what Bernie Sanders was noticing. People are realizing that the world's definition of freedom has turned them into slaves to their own desires. They call it empowerment, but it's just addiction with better marketing. Islam gives you strength that doesn't depend on applause.
You don't need validation when you have direction. You don't need to prove your worth when Allah already knows it. That's why when you see a Muslim standing in prayer, unmoved, focused, peaceful, that's not submission to weakness. That's surrender to strength. That's a person who has mastered their mind and their ego. You see, Islam builds soldiers of peace, warriors of patience, people who can stay kind in a cruel world, calm in a chaotic world, and grounded in a greedy world. That's not weakness. That's divine power in motion. Because in Islam, strength isn't about conquering others. It's about conquering yourself.
And when a person learns that, they stop breaking others to feel strong. They start building others because they already are strong. And that's what the world is missing. Strength that heals, not hurts. A strength that guides, not gloats. Because every society that glorifies power over principle eventually collapses. But a society that glorifies self-control builds legacies that last. So here's my ruling on strength. If your power makes you arrogant, it's fake. If your power makes you humble, it's real. True strength is silent, steady, and sacred. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. And Islam, my dear, teaches that kind of strength better than any self-help seminar or motivational influencer ever could.
Case closed. Now let's pull out the next file, because it's the backbone of everything Islam stands for: justice. And this one's going to sting because the world's been pretending to care about it while trampling it under every shiny slogan it sells. Now let's get to the next exhibit: justice, the one word everybody loves to chant but nobody seems to practice. Oh, they'll post about it, they'll march for it, they'll hashtag it, but when it comes to standing up for truth, even if it costs them their comfort, suddenly everyone gets amnesia. The world's courts are overflowing with lawyers, yet justice feels like a rumor. But Islam doesn't play around with justice.
It doesn't twist it to fit convenience, and it sure doesn't care how powerful or popular you are. The Quran lays it down as clear as a verdict from heaven. O you who believe, stand firmly for justice, even if it be against yourselves, your parents, or your relatives. Now tell me, which modern ideology dares to demand that kind of integrity?
None. Because Islam doesn't just talk justice, it lives it, breathes it, and enforces it. And this isn't about political showmanship or courtroom drama, it's about divine accountability. Every action, every word, every whisper is recorded. You don't get away with oppression just because you have influence.
You don't escape the truth just because you can spin it better.
In Islam, the final judge isn't swayed by fame, bribery, or bias. It's Allah, the all-seeing, the all-just. That alone keeps a believer humble, careful, and awake. And Bernie Sanders, bless his old political heart, caught onto that vibe. He said people are exhausted by corruption, the kind that hides behind power and money. And you know what? He's right. People are done watching injustice dressed up as policy. The poor are trampled, the weak are silenced, and the powerful walk free with a grin. But Islam brings a balance no system has managed to maintain. It doesn't separate morality from law. It builds law upon morality.
You cheat, lie, steal, or exploit. Doesn't matter who you are, you're held accountable. You earn what you deserve. And that's why this message shakes the world, because it's pure, it's uncompromising, it's everything people secretly wish their governments were
Honest, fair, fearless. You see, in Islam, justice isn't selective, it's sacred. It's not based on emotion or popularity. You don't punish the innocent to protect your tribe, and you don't excuse the guilty because they share your flag. You stand for truth even if it makes you the villain of the day. That's real justice. That's divine justice. Look through history. When Muslims truly lived by that principle, the world prospered.
From scholars to rulers, merchants to soldiers, they knew the weight of fairness.
Non-Muslims under Islamic rule often said they felt safer under Muslim governance than under their own leaders.
Why?
Because they knew Islam's justice didn't discriminate. It didn't ask your background before giving you your due. It didn't care what you looked like, where you came from, or what language you spoke. It cared about what was right. And in a world drowning in bias, that's revolutionary. But here's the tragedy. Modern societies love to talk about justice until it costs them profit or pride. Then suddenly, silence becomes policy. Islam doesn't allow that luxury.
Doesn't permit selective outrage. Justice isn't a trend, it's a trust. And it's the reason the world, deep down, still respects Muslims who stand firm in their morals, even when the media paints them as harsh. The truth is, people crave that kind of firmness, because when you strip away the noise, the one thing humanity is starving for isn't entertainment, it's fairness. Islam delivers that without compromise. So here's my ruling. Justice in Islam isn't an accessory, it's the backbone. You break it, everything collapses. You uphold it, everything flourishes. And that's exactly why, no matter how many lies are told about it, people keep coming back to this faith, because they recognize real balance when they see it. Case dismissed. Now let's move on to the next file.
Now, for the final case, truth, the closing argument of everything we've talked about, because when the lights go out, when the noise dies down, when the world stops clapping, all that's left is the truth. And let me tell you, truth doesn't care about trends, polls, or popularity. Truth doesn't bend for comfort or contracts. It stands sharp, clean, unbothered. But the modern world, oh, it's allergic to it. People will twist the truth, water it down, package it with fancy filters just to make it easier to swallow. They'll call lies opinions and confusion freedom. They'll tell you everything's subjective, that there's no absolute right or wrong, as if morality were a buffet line where you get to pick what suits your taste. But Islam says, no way. Truth isn't up for negotiation. Truth is truth, whether you like it or not, whether the world claps or cancels you. And that's why Islam scares people, because it doesn't shift with culture, it defines it. It doesn't follow the world, it leads it. You can't edit divine law to fit human ego. You either stand with truth or you stand in the way of it. The Quran doesn't dance around this and say truth has come and falsehood has vanished. Surely falsehood is bound to vanish. You hear that? That's the final gavel. Truth doesn't need approval. It needs believers brave enough to carry it. And that's what Islam builds. People who live honestly, fearlessly, and consistently, even when the whole world's spinning in circles. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, say what is true, even if it is bitter. And that right there is the kind of courage missing today. Because we live in a time where everyone's afraid of being disliked, but Islam teaches you to be afraid only of disappointing Allah. And let me tell you something, that kind of freedom terrifies tyrants and confuses hypocrites. Because when a believer stands for truth, you can't buy them, break them, or bribe them. They answer to a higher court, the one above the sky. That's what made Muslim civilization strong. That's what made individuals unshakable. They weren't chasing approval. They were serving purpose. And that's what Bernie Sanders was noticing deep down. He saw a people who still live by principles when the rest of the world has sold theirs for convenience. A people who still pray 5 times a day when the rest of the world can't focus for 5 minutes. A people who still bow to God when others bow to fame, fashion, and falsehood. And whether the media admits it or not, that kind of conviction commands respect, because in a world of masks, the one who dares to be real becomes unforgettable. Islam is that reality, raw, timeless, unbending. It doesn't ask for followers, it asks for witnesses. And when you become one, when you live truth, speak truth, defend truth, you don't just exist, you matter.
Because truth gives your life weight, purpose, eternity. You're no longer just another name scrolling through the feed. You become part of a legacy written in light, and that's the part the world can't erase. They can mock Islam, misrepresent it, try to silence it, but they can't stop the truth, because truth doesn't need defending, it only needs revealing. And every time someone opens the Quran with an honest heart, that truth burns through the lies like sunlight through fog. So here's my final ruling. In this courtroom of life, trends expire, power shifts, beauty fades, but truth stands forever. And Islam, whether the world admits it or not, is that truth. It's not just a religion, it's a verdict, one that's already been delivered by the Almighty himself. Case closed, judgment entered. The world can argue all it wants, but in the end, truth doesn't lose, it just waits.
Now let's get to the next case file, action, because I've seen a lot of people talk big about change, justice, faith, peace, and discipline, but when it comes time to move, they freeze like statues. Everyone's a philosopher online, but a ghost in real life. The world's full of motivational noise, but allergic to actual effort. People pray for success like it's a delivery order. They want paradise, but they can't bother to walk the path. Well, Islam doesn't play that game. It doesn't feed laziness. It calls it out loud and clear. The Quran says, indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. You hear that? That's a legal clause from the divine court. You want better, do better. Islam isn't about sitting around waiting for miracles. It's about becoming one through action, intention, and consistency.
You pray, you plan, you persist. That's the formula. The Prophet Muhammad didn't change the world by complaining about it. He walked through the desert. He spoke truth to tyrants. He built a community with patience and sacrifice. Real faith doesn't just live in your heart. It moves through your hands and your choices. That's why Muslims are commanded to act, to feed the hungry, free the oppressed, educate the ignorant, protect the weak. Every act of kindness counts. Every honest job is worship. Every moment of integrity is a victory. Every act of kindness counts. Every honest job is worship. Every moment of integrity is a victory.
You see, Islam turns life into a courtroom of daily tests, and your actions are your testimony. You can quote the Quran all day long, but if your behavior doesn't reflect it, you've already lost the case. And that's what Bernie Sanders was touching on. People are exhausted by talk. They're starving for authenticity. They don't want another influencer preaching peace while living for profit. They want people who walk the walk, and that's what Islam demands. You can't just believe in goodness, you have to be it. Islam makes you responsible, not for the entire planet, but for your corner of it. You clean your heart, you fix your home, you treat people right, and guess what? The ripple spreads. It's not about doing everything, it's about doing your part. Every single day you want to change the world. Start by changing how you treat the waiter, your parents, your neighbor, because Islam doesn't separate worship from work. It makes both sacred. Every honest act becomes an offering. Every good deed becomes an investment. Even a smile, yes, a smile counts as charity. And that's what makes this faith so powerful. It's not a religion of words, it's a religion of works. That's why when Muslims truly live Islam, the world notices, not because of what they say, but because of what they do. Islam doesn't just tell you to dream of a better world, it trains you to build it with your own hands. And in a culture obsessed with shortcuts, that's revolutionary, because everyone wants results without resistance, blessings without effort, heaven without prayer. Islam says no, roll up your sleeves, earn your peace, earn your paradise. Every step counts. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to move. Because faith without action is like a verdict without evidence. It doesn't hold up. And that's the beauty of it. Islam rewards even the smallest motion toward goodness. You take one step toward Allah, and He comes running toward you. Now that's divine justice mixed with mercy. So here's my ruling on this case. Talk less, act more. Don't just say you believe, prove it. Because in Islam, your legacy isn't written in your intentions, it's written in your actions. So stop waiting for the world to change and start being the reason it does. Case closed.
Now let's pull out the final file, truth, because after all the noise, lies, and confusion, the last judgment in this courtroom isn't about who shouted the loudest. It's about who stood for the truth even when standing alone.
Now let's get to the next case file, action, because I've seen a lot of people talk big about change, justice, faith, peace, and discipline, but when it comes time to move, they freeze like statues. Everyone's a philosopher online, but a ghost in real life. The world's full of motivational noise, but allergic to actual effort. People pray for success like it's a delivery order. They want paradise, but they can't bother to walk the path. Well, Islam doesn't play that game. It doesn't feed laziness. It calls it out loud and clear. The Quran says, indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. You hear that? That's a legal clause from the divine court. You want better, do better. Islam isn't about sitting around waiting for miracles. It's about becoming one through action, intention, and consistency.
You pray, you plan, you persist. That's the formula. The Prophet Muhammad didn't change the world by complaining about it. He walked through the desert. He spoke truth to tyrants. He built a community with patience and sacrifice. Real faith doesn't just live in your heart. It moves through your hands and your choices. That's why Muslims are commanded to act, to feed the hungry, free the oppressed, educate the ignorant, protect the weak. Every act of kindness counts. Every honest job is worship. Every moment of integrity is a victory. Every act of kindness counts. Every honest job is worship. Every moment of integrity is a victory.
You see, Islam turns life into a courtroom of daily tests, and your actions are your testimony. You can quote the Quran all day long, but if your behavior doesn't reflect it, you've already lost the case. And that's what Bernie Sanders was touching on. People are exhausted by talk. They're starving for authenticity. They don't want another influencer preaching peace while living for profit. They want people who walk the walk. And that's what Islam demands. You can't just believe in goodness, you have to be it. Islam makes you responsible, not for the entire planet, but for your corner of it. You clean your heart, you fix your home, you treat people right, and guess what? The ripple spreads. It's not about doing everything, it's about doing your part. Every single day you want to change the world. Start by changing how you treat the waiter, your parents, your neighbor, because Islam doesn't separate worship from work. It makes both sacred. Every honest